kind of you brought it up. It's a passion project for you. So I'll ask, what was kind of the beginning workings of putting this together, and kind of how long? Can you just walk us through how long did it take you to kind of put it together from start to finish?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. These things definitely don't happen overnight. They kind of evolve over years and years, actually. And this one started back in 2018. I was working for ESPN Films and 30 for 30, and the NBA and NBA Entertainment actually approached us, and we have a great working relationship with them. And they were like, listen, we only have the abundance of footage that we had for The Last Dance for one other story, and that is the 1996 women's Olympic team. Now, mind you, The Last Dance had not come out yet, but obviously it was in the process of being worked on. And they just said, we have 500 hours in our library. We've never gone through it, honestly, and nobody's ever done anything with it. And would someone on your team want to kind of comb through these tapes and see if there's something there? And so that was a conversation in 2018. Fast forward to 2020 and the pandemic, and we really started to like reevaluate like the types of stories we're telling and what types of stories we can tell that don't need to be like fully originally shot, right? Like stories that can be really heavily reliant on archival. And, being a huge hoops person growing up, my dad was a college basketball coach. I played basketball, was very short, so never made it to the college level, but I played in high school. But huge fan of this group of women, like Lisa Leslie Jersey, remember those Olympics very vividly. And I just kept pushing and pushing. And I'm like, this is something that we need to just get our hands on and see if there's something here. And so we ended up having all the tapes sent over to us and began to screen it. And honestly, after like the first night of looking through this footage, I knew that there was something special here. Like these women in hotel rooms, on buses, really intimate, kind of like revealing footage that could tell a much bigger story than the 60 games they won that season. And so I put together a presentation to my bosses for like how we could do this. And they commissioned it as a feature length 77-minute film. And so that was March of 2021. And then fast forward 6 months, I end up interviewing every single woman on that team, Tara Vanderveer, the head coach. And I go back to my bosses at ESPN and I'm like, listen, there is no way in hell that we're going to fit this entire story into 77 minutes. Like, you got to make it longer. So kudos to them. They said yes. And from the moment that we started filming through delivery and air date, it was about 14 months from start to finish.
We are, believe it or not, already an eighth of the way through this season. Some teams have played up to 11 games already. So season already feels a little bit like it's flying by. Just so you guys know, we are looking at odds when we're looking at these awards and things like that. And we are using bovadasportsbook.com to check in with those odds. So that's where we're getting our numbers from, just to kind of put some context in the conversation there. So real quick, we'll just blast through these awards here, Justin, and get some quick thoughts on that. If there's any surprises, of course, I want you to bring that up.
Of course.
But taking a look, and we'll start with the big kahuna, of course, the NBA regular season MVP award. And what you'll notice here is that Luka and Giannis have separated themselves from the competition, and it's early, but when you look at their numbers, it's no surprise. We've got Luka has the slight edge right now as the favorite at plus 275, Giannis at plus 300. Both of their teams doing fairly well. Luka has that, I would say, slight edge over Giannis in that he has less help on his team, less established success on that team. And so Giannis, I mentioned, is at plus 300. The next closest is Jason Tatum at plus 800. So you can see the separation there, and then followed by Ja Morant at plus 1,000, Steph Curry at plus 1,500. Some stats for you with Luka. He's averaging right now a ridiculous 36 points per game with 8 rebounds, 8 assists.
2K numbers.
That's right. Filling up the stat sheet. And he's also averaging with that 1.9, so very close to 2 steals per game. Giannis, also pretty ridiculous. 31.8 points per game, 12.2 boards per game, and 5.3 assists. So assists a little down for Giannis compared to other years, like I believe compared to years that he's won the MVP in the past. He's also averaging a steal and 1.4 blocks per game. Interestingly enough, both of these players shooting less than 30% from the three-point line, which I found interesting. Not too surprising, I guess. And Luka is a volume shooter, very much so this season. But that was kind of one of those things with Chuck Cooperstein that we were kind of talking about had to improve for Luka. So any thoughts real quick on the MVP award?
No, you took the words right out of my mouth with Luka. I think it comes down to expectations, team strength, and then also injuries. And I think with Luka, this is kind of his awards to lose. I think we've seen with the awards committee, it's really hard to, give that award, multiple times. And just with Giannis winning it, I just think the odds are stacked against him against some really high competition. And I really think if Memphis is top three, if Dallas is top three within this playoff seeding, I think it's going to be awfully tough for Giannis to win that award between Ja Morant and Luka. I just think it's going to be really, really difficult. But it's going to be fun to see. I mean, I think it's for me at least. I think another factor in this is entertainment value. Luka always has an entertaining play. Something that's going to get the people going on social media. Him and Ja Morant. I think that's a factor in all of this as well. Just the social media element. And with Giannis, he's spectacular too. But I mean, compared to Luka and Ja Morant, I think they're going to have the more, sensational plays.
Yep. Yeah, I think the path is right there for Luka right now. And I do definitely agree with that voter fatigue narrative. So perhaps a little bit of regret on my part in picking Giannis as my MVP prediction. But, Luka is certainly well deserving to this point of the year.
It's still early. People get
no
hurt.
Regrets there.
You never know.
That's true. Well, knock on wood. Let's hope that doesn't happen, of course. But yeah, both of them separated from the pack, like we said, and they're neck and neck right now. Moving right along, taking a look at the Sixth Man of the Year award. This one might be the most interesting shift that we have in these awards. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we both picked, I know I did, Jordan Poole as the Sixth Man of the Year candidate. He had the narrative going in. Seems like people have kind of forgotten about that. Plus, the Warriors are struggling at 4-7 right now at the time we record this podcast. So Jordan Poole is still in second place here, and separation between him and the third place guy, Christian Wood. But an unlikely favorite emerges in Russell Westbrook, who has accepted a role off the bench and has been, for the most part, excelling there for the Lakers compared certainly to when he was a starter. So again, on Bovada, Russell Westbrook plus 120 right now, the favorite. Jordan Poole plus 300. Christian Wood plus 700, Malcolm Brogdon plus 2,000 for the Celtics, and then Bones Highland at plus 2,500. There's your top five right now. Yeah, he's been making some noise as well lately. So I guess I'm perplexed because there's still somewhat of a chance that Westbrook gets traded this year, which would totally potentially just scrap this whole Sixth Man of the Year contention for him. Do you see, if things stay as they are right now, would you change your mind as far as him being that Sixth Man of the Year candidate? I mean, another thing certainly is team success, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And honestly, I think these odds are from his reputation more than anything else. I just think he's clearly the biggest name on this list.
Right.
Former MVP. So I think that has a lot to do with it too. And I think you're right, man. I think the Lakers, I just think they're going to struggle. You're more a LeBron fan than I am. I like LeBron, but I think you're probably totality our friendship. You've been more of a LeBron follower than me. And this season he has struggled, even though his numbers are really sensational in terms of his field goal percentage. He has struggled. So if their shooting doesn't improve, I just don't think this team is bound to really do anything. And I just don't see the value of Westbrook winning Sixth Man of the Year. I mean, Anthony Davis is apparently on the trading block. So there's just a lot of moving parts, a lot of just kind of doomsday scenarios with the Lakers. And with that, unless they make some kind of dramatic improvement, I don't see how there's any kind of a shot Westbrook wins this award, even if he has great stats coming off the bench.
Yeah, that's why for me, great points there. I'm not a gambling man, but if I were, I don't know, the chaos of that
Right.
team right now would really make me hesitate. Some interesting kind of, further down the line in terms of odds, but Colin Sexton is on this list. Anthony Simons, I think, are both kind of interesting. Kevin Love also at plus 7,000 for Cleveland is
Simon's has been
interesting to me
sensational.
as well. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Every time I see him.
Um, everyone likes a narrative with that. And I think Kevin Love has a solid narrative. He's going to get a lot of, maybe it's not the right way to phrase it, but like sympathy vote, like a lot of people rooting for him for the time he served in Cleveland and kind of struggling without LeBron afterwards and kind of being a good soldier for the most part for that team. So moving right along to the next award here, we do have some pretty big shifts here looking at our Coach of the Year candidates. And again, odds off of Bovada. JB Bickerstaff and Will Hardy are tied in the top spot for this. JB Bickerstaff, coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who we just mentioned there. Will Hardy, the coach of the improbable number one seed in the West right now, Utah Jazz. So makes sense why he's up there. Joe Mazzulla for the Celtics is plus 900. So I'm sorry, both Bickerstaff and Hardy are plus 550. Joe Mazzulla plus 900. Budenholzer, who is my pick for Coach of the Year, plus 900. Chauncey Billups, I like that at plus 1,000. And then we have several, including Willie Green, who we talked about a bit last episode.
Yeah.
He's at plus 1,000 as well, tied in that fifth spot there. So, I think it's fairly obvious why that shift happened in terms of the success that those teams have had. I think Cleveland certainly much less surprising than Utah. So if the season ended today after 12 games, the Jazz, I would give it to Will Hardy for sure for what the Jazz have done. Any thoughts on this shift or moving forward if you think any of this is sustainable for them?
I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Utah Jazz. Just talking to Andrea Urban, she covers the Utah Jazz, and it seemed like there was some optimism. I know there's a lot of question marks going into the offseason with Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, them both leaving. And I think I think she was really optimistic. I think she knew something that we didn't at the time. And this was in the summertime. So entering this season, we've seen Lauri Markkanen be rise as a real contender as most improved player of the year. His stats have been really phenomenal. He's been carrying this team. So, people had a lot of hype on Markkanen, didn't live up to the hype in Chicago. A new scenery, new environment seems to really have done him really well in Utah, and he has performed for them. So I don't think they're going to be the top seed in the West. However, I don't see them being, something like a Washington Wizards situation where, they get hot and then they're just vanish. I think they're going to be in the mix. I think Utah's most recently, they're a quality organization that they know how to win. So I think if they, remain in that kind of top 6 spot, if they don't have to be in the play-in tournament, I think Will Hardy might have a shot at, winning this award for sure.
I think that's the difficulty when you're rebuilding is just keeping everybody on the same page. I think everybody gets tired of losing, and this front office has talked, pretty openly about just the challenge of, keeping players motivated, making sure they see sort of the light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, this team won 20 games 2 years ago. They won 23 games last year, so significantly more losses than wins. And you have those guys from the 2020 class, Isaiah Stewart, Sadiq Bey, Killian Hayes, who have lost a lot, in their first 2 seasons in the NBA. I think that the coaching staff and the front office has been very careful when it comes to setting expectations. They haven't deliberately talked about making the playoffs yet. It's been very much like, let's be competitive. Like, let's make teams sweat. Like, let's be in every game. Like, let's make sure we're setting the culture that we want when we do eventually turn the corner. I thought the way Troy Weaver kind of phrased it during media day. He said the team is at ground zero right now, but they took over. Blake Griffin was still on the roster. The dead money from his contract was still on the blitz last year, so that kind of hamstrung the front office as far as being able to build a roster with actual depth. And they're a little banged up right now. They're waiting for Alec Burks and Marvin Bagley to come back. Darren Snow missed some time, but they do have better depth this year. So I think they want to see, I don't know if they necessarily want to see 2023 wins again unless players get hurt or you just lose about 1 point, every night. But regardless of how you get, to that point at the end of the season, I think they want to look back at this year and say, we were better than we were from 2020 to 2022. Even if it doesn't show up in the wins and losses, you want to see Cade, Sadiq, Jaden, all those guys show that they're players that you can build around.
So let's say this season doesn't go, live up to, the expectations that were laid out. There's a lot of anticipation about the draft class in 2023. Are there any rumblings from like the fan base in terms of, hey, we should just, call this season whatever and just, see what happens in the NBA draft lottery? Are there those rumblings among that fan base, or do they really want to see this core really rebuild and not, go the tanking routes? What is kind of the philosophy just among the fan base there?
Yeah, I think I think fans would have won 82 games and win the lottery. Honestly, I think they, I think fans like rebuilds until the losing actually starts. Like I think they have this idea of essentially like a Cinderella rebuild. Like we get a couple guys and then we exceed all expectations and then we're good. And like as we know, sometimes teams start rebuilds and then they never get out. Like I talk, Lions on Twitter a lot, just being a born and raised Detroiter and. I say, yeah, I mean, it's like year, like 2 for this front office, like year 2 for the coaching staff. Like, first they're going to lose, right? And then people are like, they've been rebuilding since I was born. And it's like yeah, but, I mean, like, they're not wrong, but, it's a different front office, right? So you kind of have to, sometimes I encourage fans, like, hey, I mean, if you're going to rebuild, it means losing. Like, I don't think you fire the coach just because he lost against the Bucks, right? Like, that's kind of inherent to rebuilding is that you're going to lose certain games. So, no, I mean, I think a lot of Pistons fans get it. Like, they understand that, Troy Weaver is not the previous GM. The previous GM was the previous GM. And you have Cade Cunningham now. You have some guys who can clearly play. And you have a lot of cap space coming up next summer. They'll be around $50 billion. So, they'll kind of have the mechanisms they need to improve pretty rapidly after they haven't won a playoff game since I was in 8th grade, so it's been a while. That was 14 years ago. But I think fans get it in general. I think the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month process of just taking your lumps sucks, and and who wants to watch losing, right? Like it makes sense. But if you kind of look at the overall picture, you look at where this team was, 3 years ago, and you just see how much young talent they have, and you might add another lottery pick this year in a pretty good draft, and you have cap space. Like there's a very clear path this team could take toward being good, a year from now or 2 years from now, and. Overall, like I think fans get it. I just think in the process of the rebuild, it's like, well, we should be winning these games, right? And it's like, well, these had 10 teams with winning records last year, and the Pistons are still very clearly a tier under most of the conference. So that's kind of how it goes, right?